What is up, everyone? Welcome to week 2 of the NFL DFS Kickoff Show on Fantasy Six Pack, where your host, that's me, Keith Flemming, and my good buddy, Joe the Brain Matz, and the Twins hat, if you're watching on YouTube, each week help you get ready for DraftKings cash games. And Joe, this is the quote-unquote tooting our horn section. We got off to a good start, my friend. The QBs that we discussed last week: Josh Allen, QB1, Jayden Daniels, QB4, Baker Mayfield, QB2, Geno, QB9. The running backs, a little bit more of a mixed bag with Bijan, Cook, Mostert. Yikes. Kenneth Walker had a very good game. Bucky Irving and Spears really disappointed, but your J.K. Dobbins pick, I know it helped me win a good bit of money, so thank you for that. The wide receivers, we just absolutely cooked on. We talked about Nico. We talked about Evans, Brian Thomas. JSN kind of disappointed, but then again, more guys that did great. And Shakir, Waddle, McConkey, even Wandell for his price. Roma Dunze was a miss, as well as Josh Reynolds, but Greg Dortch and Jalen McMillan, both again, real values who paid off. So I would go over the tight ends, but let's be honest, all the tight ends suck. So obviously, our tight end plays
Trey McBride was like the only good tight end last week, it felt like. So
well, Isaiah Likely basically left everybody in the dust Thursday, and then I guess there was no more points to be scored for tight ends, apparently. But again, we go through position by position, talk over the game slate, the main slate, game slate, main slate. And we will start with QBs like we always do. God, it's going to be hard to live up to what we did last week, Joseph. But for me, I just keep circling Baker, and we'll get into other guys in a minute. But I mean, goodness gracious, is this guy on fire? How ironic is it that he is now yet another number one pick who was written off, right?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, Baker looks pretty freaking good. And this is a significant sample size. And even how more ironic, he's playing that other number one pick that everybody had given up, Jared Goff, and the Lions in Detroit. Baker has now scored 19 points or more in 7 of 8 games, which is, kind of wild dating back to last year. For a guy that I know he ran for 21 yards last week, typically he doesn't run at all. He's thrown for 300 yards in 5 of 8, 21 touchdowns in that span. That's 2.5 per. And again, I know that Washington is one of the worst defenses in the league. I think that you did a great job. I did a great job pointing out you want to pick on Washington as much as you can, particularly in the pass. But still, the Bucky Irvin, the Jalen McMillan additions, like this Tampa offense is dangerous. Moving Godwin back to the slot. So now you got 2 really dangerous guys on the outside. Dangerous slot receiver. Kate Otton's a good, tight end. You got the 2 backs. But for me, the biggest thing is this Detroit defense. There's real issues for this pass defense. We saw it last year. And despite Puka going out very early in their matchup with the Rams, they were still able to throw the ball kind of at will, even though Cooper Kupp was kind of the only wide receiver, at least that Stafford had previous history throwing the ball to. This is now over their last 7 games. They are averaging 350 passing yards per game to opposing QBs, 13 passing touchdowns in that time frame. And oh, by the way, this is a rematch of a game not too long ago, the divisional round playoff matchup, where Baker threw for 350 yards and 3 TDs. So at 5,900, and again, we'll get into some other guys in a minute, I just can't help but continue over and over again to start with Baker there, because if you want to stack him with Evans like that, If you want to get a little bit cheaper and stack them with McMillan, I don't hate that. If you want to stack them with Godwin, I don't hate that. Right. And I like the fact that I think this game's going to be a shootout. So this is a game that if I start Baker, I probably will pair Baker with Evans and then run it back with a Jamison Williams or a Jamar Gibbs, or if you think St. Brown's going to have a bounce back game because of how much the Bucs, blitz. Like there's
David Montgomery as well. If you've got
David
it as the
Montgomery.
Lions pounding the ball and then Tampa Bay trying to chase back and get back into the game. So yeah, there's a million options.
So many options. I love that. That's where I'm starting. Any other thoughts on Baker? And then where are you kind of starting with your QBs? Like, what's the first guy that really jumps off for you for cash games?
I mean, so far as Baker goes, I do think obviously the big caveat is they played Washington, who, right where they left off last year, that's where they started. Obviously, you don't ever want to overreact one game, but they were horrific last year. PFF coverage grade, unsurprisingly, easily the worst grade among all 32 teams last week.
Yikes.
So, yeah, no surprises there. It is a good sign, though, that Baker did not seem to lose anything without Dave Canales, who now is the head coach in Carolina. Will obviously deserve some credit for what happened with him last year. We'll see against, better defenses, which will literally be everyone, I guess, compared to Washington. But I think you're right. This is one of the ones that immediately stood out to me because, my only worry last week was, and it's the reason I didn't stick to my guns and put him in like every single lineup was, what if they get out to a huge lead? They basically did, and it didn't matter because they 4 passing touchdowns. So.
They said, F you, we're scoring points to the end of this.
Yeah, let's just keep going. And it worked out doubly so because then I think the defense could let up a little bit. Obviously, Jaden Daniels just running wise was a problem the whole game.
Oh, yeah.
So, it allowed both guys who I think were like our 2 big guys, give or take Geno, to have awesome weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So that was great. And Detroit, though, removes that worry because I will be surprised if Detroit does not have success on offense in pretty much every game this season, give or take good defenses outside. That's obviously the one thing we're kind of worried about. But, I think this Detroit offense is rolling. They will score a bunch of points. Tampa Bay will have to try and keep up. Like you just said, you can just kind of pick whoever you want in this game. Again, you have McMillan and Jamison Williams. You want to go cheap. You've got a bunch of – no one's crazy expensive either. It's like I think Mike Evans is the highest priced guy in this game. And he's still in the – I think of the mid-7,000s. I know he's on my list if I check it. But,
there's a 100. He's the most.
Okay, St. Brown I'm forgetting. Yeah, obviously St. Brown's always super expensive. But, so many options in this one. And the other QBs I'm really looking at this week besides him are right in that same range. So you might want to just stick with Baker because he's the cheapest of them. But Jaden Daniels, 6,200, playing my New York Giants. I think the Giants' offense was the much bigger problem, unsurprisingly, than the defense. But as this pass rush outside of Dexter Lawrence, who Aaron Donald gone, I would say is the best defensive tackle in the NFL. Brian Burns not doing much.
Thibodeau, what happened?
Thibodeau completely disappeared. And you had Sam Darnold just looking like the dream version of Sam Darnold that Jets fans were.
I thought it was Joe Montana a few times on Sunday.
It felt like it the first half anyway, where he started, I think, 11 of 11. So, again, speaking about highly drafted QBs who are maybe finding second lives.
Oh, good call.
So obviously, if again, KOC seems like a really smart offensive coordinator. I would not say the same thing about Cliff Kingsbury, but Jane Daniels, again, he doesn't need a smart OC necessarily to have a good game because he can just run fast. So I think that's a really interesting game for him. And then Jared Goff.
Oh, no Stafford,
obviously,
huh?
Jared Goff.
The injuries, the offensive line, is that what it is? And then Puka?
I am still in on Stafford as well.
Okay.
I think all those guys in that high 5s, low 6s, I'm looking at all those guys. Because again, I think Tampa Bay will score points, which means it won't presumably just be run the entire game for Detroit. But yeah, I think Stafford, if you think they will be okay without those offensive linemen, and I mean, that is the one thing I'll say is with the Detroit defense, Stafford for most of that game is playing out of his mind because they were after him, especially when, with that banged up defense or offensive line. I mean, those guys were coming after him. They had the Detroit Lion defense had, I believe, the highest pass rushing grade on PFF.
Mm-hmm.
So they were after him. He's playing it against teams that can't protect. I think this Detroit defense is going to look pretty good. The good news is that Tampa Bay line is pretty good. You got Wirfs, who's awesome. Yes. So I think Baker will be okay. Cardinals defense is just not one that I'm overly worried about.
And rightfully so. They're awful.
There's not really anything good to say about them. Josh Allen did exactly what you thought against them. Through the air, on the ground, he's kind of doing whatever he wants. So, yeah, and I expect the Cardinals to be able to put up a reasonable number of points, just like they did against Buffalo. I don't think the Rams, even with all the talent Buffalo lost, still taking the Buffalo defense over the Rams defense. So that game screams shootout. You could also, talk about Kyler because I think he'll have some success too. But I mean, and then even within, obviously, I think you all basically have to go Cup if you're going Stafford.
We're going to get to him in a little bit. I think you have to go Cup in cash game this week, no matter what.
Oh, no. Yeah, 100% agreed. Obviously, the ownership's going to be crazy if you're
I don't care.
Going into larger pools is what I'm saying.
Oh, yeah.
I still would probably say he's just going to be in all my lineups because I don't think there's a good enough reason not to. I think you want to differentiate your lineup somewhere else. And then within that, though, if you want to double down, Demarcus Robinson, Tyler Johnson, I think throwing in one of those guys with Cooper Kupp, that's a cheap option that can kind of offset the Kupp price. And again, Stafford's not expensive. So
yeah,
I'm I would say Daniels, not necessarily in order, but Daniels, Mayfield, Stafford. I do like Goff, but I think those three are the guys that I'm going to be I'm either going to split between those three guys or eventually maybe I talk myself into just hitting one guy hard. But those are the three I think I'm deciding between probably in all my lineups, whether it's cash or in larger fields.
All right, let me give one more name because I agree with all of those. I really think it's a Baker Daniels week because of the combination of matchups and just Daniels is the upside of Lamar, right? With, $2,000 cheaper. But
and you don't have to pair him with anyone. You can
exactly.
do whatever the hell you want if you feel like it.
He's basically kind of that Justin Fields, ammo. Speaking of Justin Fields, that is the other guy that I have to mention. He's 5,400. I get it. Nobody is more upset than your boy about the Justin Fields situation because I do $100 single entry each week and I end up finishing 198 out of 1,600, double my money. That's always great. It's always great when you double your money, but I swapped Jay Daniels in the last hour for Fields because he was $700 cheaper. It let me upgrade it tight end. I think technically I made the right move, but it is a hard pill to swallow. That was the difference in me winning $200 and $1,500. Right. That was the difference in what Daniel scored in Fields in a single game, cash entry with 1,500 entries. So, but this Denver defense is still really bad. Seattle's offensive line, I jinxed them. I'm sorry if you're a Seattle fan out there and you're listening because I said there's no way they're going to have the injuries on the offensive line that they had last year, and they've already got injuries on the offensive line. And Denver, who is another unit that we talked about outside of Patrick Surtain, has no real defenders. Their best pass rusher, who's a guy really honestly I've never heard of before this year, 7 pressures on 42, drop back or 42, saps. And that just, to me, I think that Fields, especially if Denver does get pressure. I mean, Geno had a good bit of rushing yards last week, if you remember, versus Denver. Like, that is why Geno ended up having such a performance. I want to make sure I get that right. Yeah, Geno had 4 for 30 and a touchdown. Well, I know Fields, again, disappointed because he only scored 11.9, but he had 14 carries for 57 yards. If I'm going to get 14 carries from Justin Fields week in and week out and this, Arthur Smith offense, and he's 5,400, he's going to have more games like what Jaden Daniels did last week than he is like what Fields actually did. So I think Fields at 5,400 is also something you should strongly consider. And I think he's going to be low owned because a lot of people like myself got burned last week, right? And so they're going to hesitate to go back to that well. Again, we'll, follow us this weekend. We got a show on Fantasy and Frames tomorrow. I got the F6P Sunday Social with Chris Robin at 12 Sunday. I'll let you know where I eventually land. But I think right now it's Baker, Daniels, or Fields are the three guys I'm thinking about. And to your point, the same thing that you said about, Daniels is what I like about Fields. With both of those guys, I'm probably not going to stack them, even with, Daniels having a wonderful matchup, versus a Giants secondary that didn't look great last week. But I'm a little scared off of what we saw last week. Like maybe I gave him too much credit for being NFL pass ready. Right at the start of his rookie season. If you saw me rolling my eyes during when Joe was talking, I just want you to know, it's nothing Joe said. Joe is Joe to blame Matz for a reason. It's James Cook scored another freaking touchdown.
Wait, oh my gosh, that's 3?
Yes. And of course, I did a showdown lineup. I was just telling Joe, and originally I had Cook in. I was like, no, I do this every time. And I'm always disappointed. He's got 3 first half touchdowns. So your boy is not happy with James Cook, even though go Dogs, he'll always, be somewhere in my heart. What do you think about Fields? And then we'll move on to the RBs.
Oh, I think that's a very reasonable, low end play because, last week, again, 2 of our big plays were guys in the 5,600 range. And then this week I was kind of like, once you get below the Stafford Mayfield range, it's kind of like, And, Daniel Jones is 5-1-1 against Washington in his career. It's the one team he destroys, but he destroys it. He destroys them and he doesn't make mistakes in those games. Because if you actually look over his career, half of his touchdown passes against Washington came in a single game where he threw 5.
Wow.
So, and based on how just shell-shocked and off he looked in week 1, even again, this is the wait and see if there's any life left in Daniel Jones. Because if it's bad this week, write him off completely in every situation, whether it's DFS, real
it's
life,
DeVito
whatever,
time.
It's over
right?
forever.
Right, Joe? It's DeVito
Lock
time.
or DeVito. It's somebody time if he loses this game. So
I forgot Lock's there. Let's go, Wandale. You got some weapons. Let's let Lock fling it around.
So I'm steering clear there. If I'm going cheap, I'm with you. That's the play. When I look at PFF defensive grade and I look at DVOA, I think it was 3 or 4 teams that were in the bottom 7 of both. So, that's using different metrics, finding the defenses that were just absolute trash week 1. It was Arizona, it was Washington, it was Carolina, and it was Denver. Those are the 4 teams that were in the bottom 7, whether you're looking at PFF, which is watching all the film, or you're looking at DVOA, which is analyzing statistically every scenario teams were in, what you would expect to happen. Those were the 4 that just sucked. So,
and we could have predicted that, right, Joe? I know that year to
year,
year,
not shocking across the board.
If Tennessee would have been there, I'd have been like, "Hey, there you go. There's the usual suspects."
Of course, our cheap defense that I stuck to in too many lineups when the pivot to New England was there was Carolina. So that was a huge mistake on my part.
I cashed with Carolina in numerous lineups, which shows how rough. And again, why you should do cash games was I cashed, again, I think the $100 lineup scored 139 points. I finished 198 out of 1,500 people. The highest cash game I've had was 156. And again, those all cashed. So don't do MME, people. Listen to us. Do cash games. The running back position this week, Joe, to me, this is where the bread and butter is. I mean, obviously, let's just get the big one out of the way. Jordan Mason, he's a must start right at 5,200 if CMC is a no-go. I know it's a tough matchup, but I mean, volume, this offense, you can't get a better deal than him at 5,200, right?
Oh, I don't think so. I mean, probably the only guy in that range is, and again, you're banking on kind of a repeat performance, would be Dobbins, who's only, I think, 200 more expensive and in a reasonable matchup. But yeah, I mean, anytime you have a back that, and if obviously this is if CMC's out, that will get a lot of carries in the Shanahan offense. So that's obviously if there's ever a situation where just one of those Miami backs happens to exist somehow, it's the same deal. Where it's just like, these are the premier run designers in the NFL. And I guess actually Greg Roman, different system, but also premier run designer.
Yeah, I was gonna say, he kind of proved I still got
why I like the J.K. Dobbins so much.
Great call. Yep.
When you have guys in these systems, and again, it's San Francisco's most likely going to be winning 90% of their games. Yeah, it does, even if it's a tough matchup. I mean, the Jets were supposed to be a tough matchup. That was supposed to be a team that is a contender, that has arguably the best defense. And 120 yards is a couple scores. So it's like,
Mason,
there's
point,
no question. No question.
Second among running backs in avoiding tackles last week. Third in yards after contact. And can we just give some credit to Shanahan, Purdy, the San Francisco offense? I'm so tired of somebody I'm just a big fan of Purdy in general. I can't stand how he never gets any credit. Let's talk about this. His number one target, Ayuk, missed all of training camp. Trent Williams missed all of training camp. I mean, I know he was there, but you don't have CMC. And I know his numbers weren't like blow you away, but they punted on their first series and then scored on 8 straight possessions until they took one kneel to end the game. So this offense, I keep screaming it from the mountaintops. There's so much value here week after week. They're going to score points. It's the smartest offensive play caller in football. Purdy is so underrated at QB. And this is do not take this as disrespect to CMC, because they need him to win a Super Bowl. Like, I truly believe that. They don't need him first month to, in my opinion, win their division and potentially be the number 1 seed in the NFC. And that's why I think that they're going to sit him. They should sit him. And this Mason kid's different. Like, to me, out of the Mitchells and the Sermons and all these guys that have came through here over the last few years, this kid's electric, man. He looks like such a prototypical 49ers Shanahan running back.
Yeah. I'm with you all the way. Any Purdy doubts that I have are like when people were saying he was the MVP last year. I was like, I don't think he's the MVP.
Yeah, that's fair. I get that.
Because it's the best situation possible. But it's like we saw Jimmy G in more or less the same situation. Obviously, Ayuk develops, blah, blah, blah. And it's very clear that Brock Purdy is better than Jimmy G ever was. Like, I don't think that's a question. So he's good. Obviously, you've been kind of a driver of like, hey, don't ignore this guy just because he's not a cannon-armed, fast quarterback when it comes to fantasy, because the production in this offense is going to be there. And, and it's like we said, if they face a zone defense, then it's like, hey, light up Debo. If it's a man, you light up Ayuk. They have answers for basically everything. Give or take, Steve Spagnuolo in the Super Bowl was the only time they didn't seem to have an answer. But
and Patrick Mahomes, in fairness.
And obviously, in the end, Patrick Mahomes comes around. You can't stop him for an entire game. But yeah, this offense, like you said, it's a well-oiled machine. They can run the ball. They can pass the ball. They have, 2 top 15, top 20 receivers, top 5 tight end, the best running back when he's out there. And Jordan Mason's obviously not bad when he's out there. So, yeah, you should always be considering someone in San Francisco in your lineup pretty much every week. The only problem with this offense, fantasy-wise, is there are so many options. But, when CMC's out there, he is the best running back almost week in, week out, regardless of matchup. And the only reason you don't put him in DFS is the price. Jordan Mason, well, obviously not quite as dynamic as CMC. We don't have that price issue because he's like $3,000 cheaper than CMC will ever be. So yeah, cash games. Again, the ownership's going to be through the roof if CMC's not out there. But again, fire up Cooper Kupp, fire up Mason, and find other places to be different because
all right, I got
the advantages. They're just too large. Yeah.
So there's two other backs, and again, what I like about this trio, because I actually think I'm going to run these three guys and one of them in the flex, is then it allows me to have an Evans, a Kupp, and, another, expensive wide receiver. The first is Brian Robinson Jr. Sorry, Joe, versus your Giants.
No, he's on my list.
5,800. I mean, tied for the team lead in targets and receptions. That was kind of mine. I know it was a weird game. Daniels only threw for 184 yards, but that's a good sign. Sure. The bigger sign is 86% of the Commanders' rush attempts were Robinson. We weren't sure how the Robinson-Eckler split was going to go. We saw that. And, I mean, let's just be honest. They trailed in that game most of the way. I think at worst in this Giants game, it's going to be competitive, meaning he's going to get more carries. He got a majority of the red zone touches, which is great. And this Giants team, they allowed the sixth most rushing yards last year. And if you watched Aaron Jones on Sunday, I think he ran for like 95 yards on, it's over 6 yards a carry. Yeah, 14 carries. They're still having issues with him this year. Plus, what I really like, they gave up the 5 receptions for 40 yards, 2 running backs. So if you want to play Robinson, you can, which is what I prefer. I don't hate Eckler either. The other guy, which is even more of a slam dunk for me, Najee Harris, 5,500 versus Denver. I love what I saw from Najee and the Steelers offense on Sunday, unfortunately, versus my Falcons. I didn't love that it was against my Falcons, but 77% of the rush attempts week 1. Again, all summer we discussed, do you want Harris? Do you want Warren? I know Warren was a little banged up, but I've been saying it. Harris is the prototypical, like, Arthur Smith running back. Like, he's just perfect for Smith's scheme. The big thing for me, 5 red zone touches, second among all running backs. They only had 6 carries in the red zone, so it was 5-1. And then he faces a Denver defense this week that we know how bad they were last year. Most rushing yards in the league allowed right at 5 yards per carry. But Kenneth Walker, 100 yards on I think 5.2 yards per carry. Harris saw 20 carries week 1. Patterson and Warren combined for 6. And again, kind of shocking, very similar to the Robinson deal. He saw as many targets as Jaylen Warren did in the passing game, which is just crazy.
Surprising, yeah.
And then I think the big thing is that as long as Fields is the starter, which he's already been named this week, we're going to see, I think, the kind of split that we saw from Pittsburgh where 41 rush attempts. Now that's including, Fields, but still 41 rush attempts, 23 pass attempts. And what I really like about Najee this week is I just, having watched Denver and the fact that I think it was like through 3 quarters, the average air yards per attempt was less than 1 yard for Bo Nix. I don't see this Broncos offense having the ability to get up enough where Pittsburgh is in a situation where they're forced to throw, abandon the run. I think Najee Harris could have a monster game. He's 5,500. I go ahead and book it. I think he's going to get at least 20 carries. I think he'll get at least 80 yards, and I think he scores a touchdown. And for 5,500 in a cash game, sign me up all day. I actually have him ranked. I like Harris the best. Mason is the guy that's going to be in the most lineups, obviously, because you just have to for the value. Yeah. And then I really like Robinson as well. But those 3 backs, all under 6K, gives you a ton of flexibility, particularly if you then go play Baker, Daniels, or even Fields. Now we're talking where you can do pretty much whatever you want with the rest of your lineup.
Yeah, I'm with you. There's some high and mid-tier guys that I do find interesting. Jonathan Taylor against Green Bay, I think, is an interesting one. Obviously, we just saw Saquon light them up. My assumption is Malik Willis is terrible, and Indy is going to be winning most of this game. So if you're looking at a high-end running back, I think it's definitely Taylor.
How much do you look at that Green Bay Philly game? Like, how much do you account for the
It's
field?
a weird game because the field sucked. Obviously.
That's what I was asking. Like, do you like just take a little bit of what you saw? I mean, obviously not all of it. I'm saying,
yeah,
don't be shocked if like it's not anything like what we saw from either offensive unit. Obviously, Green Bay is going to be different, but from Philly, right. I'm curious to see, is Barkley really going to be able to run that well in this offense? Is, Philly's passing game going to be that effective, or was a lot of it the field and just nobody could get any gripping?
Right, and obviously that's generally going to be harder for the defense because the offense knows where they're going.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I think there's definitely truth to that. That field was atrocious, and I don't understand how the NFL can continue to have these problems. I know, it's foreign field, but I don't know, take some fucking time to get down there beforehand
right.
and make sure it's up to par.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's true. This is probably not a play I'm huge on if Jordan Love is out there. I'm assuming Indy's.
Wait a minute, there's a chance Love plays?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. I got you. Yeah, I got you. I'm an idiot.
Yeah, maybe that was poor phrasing on my part. But
no, it wasn't. Yeah. I'm a moron. I got you.
So the fact that I think this Indy offense, which looked pretty damn good against Houston, who was a good defense last year for the most part.
Can Anthony Richardson throw a ball, Joe Matz? Oh my God.
He misses sometimes, but man, when he hits, it's some of the most incredible shit you've ever seen.
The play where he almost fell down, and what did he throw it like 60 yards in the air on that ball or something?
I believe was 65 or 66.
That is outrageous.
On a dime. Not like that guy was so open and he was waiting for the ball or something like that. It was like, if he's a yard short on that, it's broken up or picked. And it's no, he can do that. That's why you take that guy in the top 10.
Right? Yeah.
So, yeah. And again, Shane Steichen, genius. So, yeah, I think they're going to be up. I do like the Taylor play. The other mid-high tier guys, again, I think Las Vegas stinks. Derrick Henry. We already talked about the Lions guys. I think there's a reasonable shot either of those guys has a big game. James Conner against the Rams, I think, is an interesting one. James Conner just continues to be one of those guys that no one thinks about and then puts up 15,
we talked about it this summer, though, and we did a few shows together that it's like he has become the Mike Evans of running backs, and it's so freaking true. Like seeing them both go off week one, it's like, when will people learn? Until these guys are done, quit writing them off. Yeah,
absolutely. J.K. Dobbins, again, he's playing Carolina, so like they should be winning. They should be winning this game. Obviously, we expect the.
Do you like Gus Bus this week as well in that factor? Because you think if they're up, they get in the red zone. Maybe it's one of those a Gus Edwards game where he has like 25 yards rushing on 10 carries, but 2 touchdowns.
I think that is absolutely in play. It's just because what's the difference between the two of them?
It's not a lot, I don't think. Yeah,
it's still not large.
It's $200.
Yeah, so it's hard. Obviously, I think you raise a good point in the goal line situations. I think that's true. Obviously, Dobbins was scoring from, he had like a 60-yard touchdown run. But, I see one guy who averaged like 3 yards a carry and another guy who averaged 13 yards a carry on the same volume. I'm just going to generally lean because, again, I'm a JK is healthy. He's good. And the worry was, is he ever the same again? He looked freaking good. So I love that play. And I think you're dead on with Harris. Obviously, I do like the Robinson play. But, yeah, to me, Harris dominating the touches. Denver last season, 31st in points against running backs. So they were awful there. And then PFF grade on tackling. Again, we're going off of 1 week.
Right. But it wasn't great last year, if I remember either.
But 30th in tackling on PFF grade last week. So, if you can't tackle,
that's an issue.
It's going to be bad at the run game. So, yeah, I think for me, the guys I'm really locking in on there, I'm probably going a little cheaper. I like Robinson. Maybe it's, I just don't want to fully bet against the Giants because this is one of the few games I think we could win.
Right.
But yeah, Harris, Dobbins, Mason, just 1, 2, 3.
I do
I'm
like
throwing
that.
those guys in lineup after lineup this week.
Because the Chargers are kind of now, I think we can agree with Roman and just Harbaugh's philosophy, and seeing that those two guys really got all the carries. I mean, when you get two guys in that range versus a bad defense and they're going to pound the rock, I do. I think that the good thing, to your point, it would not shock me if Dobbins ends up with more touches than Robinson, and he has more of the ability to bust a big one, plus the fact that he's facing a worse defense. I know your Giants defense is bad, but Carolina, I mean, when you ate New Orleans, looked so good that on the waiver wire show, 3 freaking Saints were recommended. I almost quit the show, Joe. I was so freaking mad that 3 different Saints were recommended to be pick off waivers. I'm like, it was the Panthers. Everybody slow your roll. We'll see this week versus Dallas. I think that you're really onto something there. And, you could be right that Dobbins, you just nailed it last week. And honestly, nailed it 3 weeks ago, even before we got close to the game with the first look, that if he's anywhere near the guy that he was, which, I mean, he looked pretty freaking explosive. Didn't you think?
All right.
Yeah. In that offense, I think, that could end up, if he stays healthy, being a league winner in fantasy football leagues, where people that got Dobbins would probably their last pick is going to be very excited. Any other darts before we move on to wide receiver?
The one even cheaper guy, although it's not cheap enough that I think I'm going to end up putting him in lineups, is Tajay Spears against the Jets, just because I think this is the Jets bounce back. It's their defense, especially bouncing back against Will Levis, which I think that's going to change the snaps in that backfield in Spears' favor, because it's pretty clear, as much as the 50-50 talk happened, that week 1 seems to suggest he will be a much bigger play in games that they're getting crushed in versus games where they're leading or in. Because, I don't think he's going to get the same amount of carries, but I do think he's the passing down back. So I think there's the potential for this to be like a 6 reception game for him. So if you need that extra $200 or $300, I would consider Tajay Spears, but I would rather have Mason, Dobbins, Paris. So
let me give you one other name. This is more for the show tomorrow night on Fantasy and Frames with Kevin, but if Lloyd is out in Green Bay, Emmanuel Wilson to me at 4,500, very intriguing. Yeah. Green Bay is going to run the ball. I mean, let's be honest. If their plan is to have Malik Willis throw it, let's just go ahead and give the W.
It's not ideal.
Yeah, put the L next to Green Bay's name, and let's just move on to next week. Wilson, 4 carries, 46 yards. He had 2 receptions. I could see him at home being heavily involved if Lloyd's out. And, it's kind of a dream scenario when somebody's 4,500 when you get that kind of deal. So that's the one other name that I would just, mention briefly. Joe's doing a walk and talk, which is always my favorite part of the show. Let's move on to wide receivers. Let's just get the, kind of like Jordan Mason. Let's just go ahead and get it over with. No offense to CeeDee Lamb, no offense to Justin Jefferson, St. Brown, or Chase. But if you are not playing Cooper Kupp this week in cash, and you were, good to remind people, I mean, what are you doing? Okay. He had 21 targets last week. That was 9 more than any other pass catcher in the NFL last week. And Puka's obviously out, which we know. And I meant to mention, Kupp turned those 21 targets into 14 receptions for 110 yards and a touchdown. That is now 70% of Stafford and Kupp games since 2021. Obviously, without Puka, so you take away the games you share with Puka, he's had over 100 yards and touchdowns. So there's a connection for you. But let's get into the data. Last season, Kupp saw a 24% target per route run rate when Puka was on the field with him. No surprise when Puka was not on the field with him, that rate would swell to almost 36%. Also, no surprise with Puka being out early in the game last week, Kupp's target per route run number rate was 41%. Only Keenan Allen saw a higher rate, which I believe is 44 or 45%. And so that should be in itself enough to say, yeah, Cooper Kupp, smash play for cash because he's under 8K, 7,600. But oh, by the way, he's facing an Arizona defense that is freaking awful, like just so bad across every level. And what I really like is they can't get pressure. And the Rams have potentially 3 offensive linemen out, which in most cases that would terrify me. Spending, 7,600 on a wide receiver who's potentially missing, more than half their offensive line. But with Arizona's inept, ability to get after the pass rusher, don't think that will be a big deal. And then an even bigger deal is Arizona's offense is frisky. They proved it last week that they're going to keep coming at you. They're going to find a way to score points. And that means we're not going to get into one of these games where the Rams, I don't feel like they're going to get up early and then just be able to kind of run and, get into a heavy run game script in the second half. I think they're going to have to pass. So I just think Kupp 7,600, you kind of have to do it in cash. It's almost like, what did Dave Eddy say last year, and we read it, too much success in cash games. Death, taxes, CMC in cash. To me, with Cooper Kupp under 8K without Puka Nacua, you might as well just edit that to death, taxes, and Cooper Kupp in cash. You're muted, bro. Uh-oh, still muted, Joseph.
All right. You'll have to tell me how I sound. I'm talking a little extra loud because my headphones died.
You sound amazing, bro. Like the voice of an angel.
Oh, well, how kind. I'm sure my students feel the same. Obviously, yeah, 100% agree on Cooper Kupp. It's like we said last week, the Cardinals defense, 18th against receivers last year on DK while facing the second fewest pass attempts. They are trash. Fire up Cooper Kupp. And yeah, just jumping ahead, fire up Demarcus Robinson at 4,000 and Tyler Johnson, who was
Which do you prefer? Because we had a little bit of this discussion, me and Kevin Tompkins did last night. We can have it again tomorrow night. With the line issues, do you think it's Johnson who's kind of the more shorter route and Robinson's the big player? Or do you feel like when you're taking the cheaper option, let's go ahead and go for the home run because we know Demarcus Robinson could potentially put up a line because he did it a bunch last year of like 4 receptions, 80 yards, and a touchdown.
Right. So Robinson, yeah, obviously had down the stretch last year the history of producing. So I think, there's a reason he's $700 more. I have a personal bias towards Tyler Johnson. He was like my sleeper guy in that draft. It was back-to-back years where I just fell head over heels for a Minnesota receiver, and the next one was Rashad Bateman, who I just continue to carry a small torch for.
He who shall not be named at basically at this point for me and you, who both loved Bateman. How's that worked out for us?
So, yeah, those guys were on the same team, Minnesota team, surprisingly.
That's wild.
Where Tyler Johnson, like, analytics darling, like yards per route run, just absolutely crushed. Not an incredible athlete, which is, why he ended up being a day 3 pick, and hasn't been super productive thus far in his career, but had a really good week 1. So I'm for sure going to be putting him in lineups because I just want to see him succeed because I enjoy being right. But yeah, I think any of those 3 guys, they could all have good games, assuming this is the shootout that we're hoping for. Love all those guys. Once again, I'm hitting up the Mike Evans train at, 7,500 against Detroit.
Yes, sir.
Like you said, too, I don't know that there's a wrong pick here. We've got, like you said, Chris Godwin back in the slot where he belongs at 6,000. That's a totally reasonable number. And, McMillan, there's some worry there because his production all came down to one single play. But I think that opportunity will still be there in this game. So he's the cheap play. Let me go down my list. He's questionable right now, so obviously pay attention to this. Again, I am steering clear of Daniel Jones in general, despite playing the Washington defense. That is not true of Malik Neighbors, who...
Ooh, see, I'm real big on Wandale, your boy Wandale again this week.
I also like Wandale for a couple of reasons. A is, again, both Neighbors and Slayton are currently listed as questionable. At this point, my expectation would be that they play special. Well, I guess I should say Neighbors. I know that Slayton's is a head one, so that's hard to anticipate.
Right, Gage, yeah.
If he's good to go, then yeah, it's not like it's a hamstring. I think Slayton's good to go if he's good to go. But my expectation is Neighbors will play, so I like him. But the worrying thing as a Giants fan, and a reason to stay away from Daniel Jones, is there was just nothing downfield in that game, which was the problem last year. It was not the problem when Tyrod Taylor played. So
yeah, isn't that weird?
There,
yeah,
but that's a negative for Neighbors. It's a huge negative for Slayton to a degree, but especially if Slayton's out. If Daniel Jones can't throw downfield, there's no point in even trying to throw Jalen Hyatt in as a dart throw. So, yeah, Wandale becomes the guy who's running a bunch of underneath stuff. So, yeah, I'm with you. Another good chance that Wandale's giving you double digits again. Let's see. I'm probably going to throw this dart until it hits. Deontay Johnson, I actually didn't like him that much last week because I kind of thought New Orleans defense was just too good. I don't have the same feeling with the Chargers defense, which I think is okay. Obviously, the pass rush is good. Danger there with Carolina. But Deontay Johnson gets open. He's 5,100. They're going to be losing that game.
I do like that his price is, down to almost 5K. Like, that's pretty appealing.
Right. If he drops below 5K, I'm going to have a hard time not constantly throwing him in every lineup I have. Your guy, Greg Dortch.
Yes.
45.
Dorchland. Welcome to Dorchland, Joe.
I mean, obviously, I don't expect him to more than double up the targets of Marvin Harrison Jr. on a consistent basis. But I think in general, because this Cardinals defense sucks ass, there's going to be plenty of targets to go around. And it's clear that Kyler has plenty of chemistry with Greg Dortch. He apparently doesn't have it with Marvin Harrison yet for some reason. So if Greg Dortch is 4,500, all right. In a game that I think is a shootout, count me in. And then the other guy, this is total dart throw. Which I guess it was the last time I talked about this guy. Diami Brown, 3,200.
Oh, shit. We're going back?
I don't know. Again, last time I had the data where it was like,
Hold on. I'm sorry. I've got to because we've got new listeners. Joe, 3 years ago, I will never forget. It's honestly when I started calling him Joe the Brain Matz, recommended Diami Brown versus Tennessee Titans. It was like week 4 or 5. He was $3,000. That is, the cheapest a wide receiver is. I made fun of Joe pretty hard when he did because I didn't even know who the fudge Diami Brown was. Diami Brown ended up getting 3 targets, caught 2 balls for 105 yards and 2 touchdowns. The best part of it is that I played him really just to make fun of Joe, like when he had a goose egg and be like, way to go, Joe. He won me a bunch of freaking money. Even more funny, Diami Brown for his fucking career still only has like 500 yards receiving. So, but Washington's pretty banged up, right? Like we're at the point now, you got to have somebody, Giant secondary. Is that where we're getting?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing here, again, that I want to caveat, I don't feel as strongly as I did the time I threw him out against the Titans.
That was an awful Titans secondary. Oh,
my
God.
Yeah, and then we were like, I don't know, 6-7 weeks into the season, I think. It was enough to know they were awful against deep passes. And also that's exactly what Diami was being used for in that version of the Washington offense. Now, the Giants, for as bad as they were on the pass D last week, it was really that they just couldn't stop stuff in general. It's not that they were getting torched on deep bombs. But the thing that's interesting to me is you have a young group of corners that has not been overly impressive. That's being a very kind Giants biased way of describing them. And then the best two safeties we had the prior 2 years. Jordan Love, who was there 2 years ago, was a good safety. He's in Seattle now. He had to pick week 1. Xavier McKinney, best safety we had last year. Huge contract. He had to pick week 1 for Green Bay. So, yeah, we're starting a very inexperienced secondary all around. There's some questions about the quality of those safeties. I do think the danger is this pass rush could come alive because
there's a lot of talent there, too. I mean, God almighty, Burns, y'all should be able to get a pass rush.
And Diami Brown had 0 targets last week. So, again, this is total shot in the dark. But I think there's opportunity there because you have a young quarterback who his greatest skill outside of just being incredibly fast was his touch on deep bombs at LSU.
Yep.
Gorgeous. And then you've got a group of safeties and corners that are pretty inexperienced. If this was actually Wink Martindale's defense still, I'd be pretty much fire it up because there's going to be open plays because they're going to bring 7 and if it gets picked up at all or he scrambles out. This is a more conservative defense, but this is the first time since that time I called it out where I'm interested. I'm intrigued. We'll see what happens. There's a chance he gives you an absolute offer, which I guess was the chance last time.
Oh, for sure.
And, yeah, I don't feel quite as strongly about throwing him in because he's.
What was the tight end that I did this twice in one season? Remember where it was the same deal where you kind of mocked me this guy's still in the league and he scored 2 touchdowns and I think he did it again. So maybe we're on to something here. And I also want to add Terry McLaurin's ADOT last week. I know he only got 4 targets. It was 20. His average depth of target was 20 yards. So I
was going to say Terry McLaurin, actually, I forgot to put him on my list. But, yeah, absolutely Terry McLaurin is a guy you should be looking at this one.
But I'm saying it could be the same thing for Diami.
Yeah.
I've got some guys I want to ask you about. The first one is, am I going crazy? Why is Allen Lazard off of 9 targets, 6 receptions, 89 yards, and 2 touchdowns, 3,300? Am I being punked? To me, that pretty much is probably a smash play against a Tennessee secondary that I know technically they looked good last week. They played a rookie QB in his first start. I'm not buying it. I don't believe that secondary is that much better.
No.
I think I'm going to have Lazard in lineups at 3,300.
No, literally the only guy I haven't talked about that is on the long list that I made is Allen Lazard.
Okay.
Because I was also very confused because
Williams is $2,000 more.
The history of Aaron Rodgers is he has trouble trusting new people.
Randall Cobb, hello. He kept getting a year after year. Yeah.
Once you're in the circle of trust, he will feed you. But you got to get there first. And obviously, you're going to feed Garrett Wilson because it's apparent that he's awesome.
Yeah, Tyler Conklin, he's you're not in the circle of trust yet, bro.
Yeah.
But a lot of people
you've got the guy who played 3 snaps last year and 1 game this year so far. Yep. There hasn't been a ton of opportunity, and that showed in week 1 where Allen Lazard is getting fed the ball.
Wow.
And, I don't understand. I feel like Allen Lazard should be $4,000. I don't understand why he's down here at 33.
I'm with you.
I guess the argument is maybe they crushed them. This is really a Breece Hall game, blah, blah, blah. But
I didn't think Rodgers looked that great.
He did not.
Why I'm going, I don't know if they're going to just I think the Titans might be one of those teams that they're just frisky this year. They're going to run the ball right, keep games close, and see if they can make things happen. But 3,300, again, he got 9 targets. You can get a guy that had 9 targets, and to your point, Rodgers is very loyal to his dudes. That's hard. I can't wait to talk to Dave Eddy about this. We're supposed to have a phone call Saturday. I want to see. I'm assuming Dave's kind of on our wavelength here where he's this guy's got to get in the lineup.
Right. Which, again, why Diami's interesting to me. Tyler Johnson and Lazard are probably going to be those super low guys I'm throwing in most of my lineups.
All right.
The volume was there week 1, and I don't have a great reason to think it disappears in week 2.
Right. All right, a few more. Debo 6,800.
Mm-hmm.
Again, if CMC misses, we know he's going to get rush attempts. Like that's the 49ers ammo, right?
Yes.
And Minnesota, pretty good pass rush, right? And typically that means more quick passes underneath. So I am considering. I'm not sure though, because again, there's those guys that just with Evans and Cup being within like $600-700 of that, it's kind of hard to shy away from that. Brandon Cooks, 5,600. You have to assume Lattimore on Lamb, right? And Cleveland, another team that's kind of got one shutdown corner, right? Lamb didn't have the greatest game. Cooks kind of ate, right? Scored the touchdown. And then the last guy who I need to know he's healthy, but if so, I am all in. Jameson Williams, 5,300. This is the finally Keith was right all along tour. Okay. And yeah, I'm calling it the Keith. I know there's a lot of people, but I've been sounding like a moron for the last 2 years because I said that this guy was better than Olave. He's better than Wilson. He's better than London. He's the best receiver in that class. I thought he was like the best receiver to come out outside of Jefferson and Chase. I was like, this is the most talented receiver I've seen come out in the last 5-6 years. And, oh, by the way, all of a sudden, this is back-to-back 20-plus point games. Both of them, he played 70% of snaps, which he has not done a lot in his career. I think it's only like the 4th and 5th time he's done that in his career. 6 touches for 134 yards and score. The big thing, 9 targets that led the team. I know St. Brown's going to have bigger days, especially against a team that gets after the QB like they're playing this week in Tampa and blitzes, but still significant. And I know the Bucs defense looked good week 1, but come on, that was a rookie QB. It's just like with Tennessee. I'm not falling for it until I truly see it against a team that can throw the ball and has elite weapons that this is that team, because the Bucs last year, 3rd most passing yards, 65 plays of 20 yards or more. And the last time these two teams met, wide receivers accounted for 14 receptions for 160 yards and 2 scores. So I believe in Jameson. I love that they cleared the room. I don't know about you, I was terrified when he went out briefly in that game because it looked like he blew out his knee. Like I really thought like he was done.
That's the thing with the guys that we've wanted to believe in. Like obviously with Dobbins, it's literally just been injuries.
Yes, it is.
Jameson's had a multitude of like things that have stopped him. But you're like, yeah, when you get that glimpse of like, oh, this is it, it's finally happening, and then it's just like, oh my God. It's
not meant to be, right? Like it's just like, man, this guy's it's just never gonna happen. So I do like him. We need to figure out a little more about his injury. We'll get to that. All right.
Wait, real quick.
Yeah, of course.
I just want to double up on some of the stuff you just said because I was like, you know what? With Debo, Minnesota top 10 team in running zone last year, according to PFF. Yes. Debo's the zone guy. Ayuk's the man guy. Debo's splits are like big enough.
Outrageous, right? Like
if it's a top 10 huge man team, I just bail. And if it's a top 10 zone team, I'm like, hey, let's go. Where Ayuk, I think, can still be successful against zone. The problem is there's so many guys.
Right.
And then Brandon Cooks. I mean, last week, I know I mentioned that Ben Solak had an article where he mentioned CeeDee Lamb was much more productive against man coverage. I looked it up just now. Brandon Cooks also last year, much more productive against man coverage, where he was barely over a yard per route run against zone. And, he wasn't incredible like CeeDee Lamb was against man, because I think CD was like 3.5 yards or something per route run, which is insane. Yeah,
like one of the best.
He was like half that. But the point is, Brandon Cooks, better against man. Saints, I believe, second in man defense last year, at least through week 17, because that's the numbers I have up from PFF on my computer. But yeah, so you're a heavy man team.
Shadows, right? If I'm not mistaken.
I believe he often does. Yeah. So, yeah, which also means maybe it's, if both of your top receivers, I know Jake Ferguson was also better against man last year. Maybe that's just that the Cowboys were better against man. So that could also just, if you have money to spend, you want to go Dak, maybe that's a play. But yeah, I'm with you on both of those plays. I think are advantageous matchups.
All right. So the tight ends, to be honest, there
It's
is
hard
not.
to say.
Well, I was just gonna say there's not a lot of guys that I'm going for this week. Are you gonna is McBride on your list?
I mean, I think he just has to be.
Okay. So we don't even
He's
really
the one guy where it's like he's out there all the time. And of all those tight ends that, I think we both thought there were like 7 tight ends. You felt pretty good in season long. Like, give me one of those. I'll be solid. He is the only one who really came through last week. And not just, overall production, but just target share. I think
just missed a touchdown too in the end zone, which was really...
those top 7 guys where you're going Andrews, you're going Kelsey, you're going Kincaid. He was.
Pitts got a touchdown at least. My boy, he finally got a touchdown.
But he was the one guy where it's like his target share, I think, was like high 20s, if I'm remembering correctly. I don't have it in front of me.
It was the highest. It's 29%.
Okay.
Do you know how many targets he's had over his last 7 games?
I'm going to say close to 70. I'm going to say
75.
75, which is massive.
Do you know how many first read targets he had last week? And again, for all these people who are like, oh, Harrison is going to eat into McBride. 9 first read targets last week. As I told people, McBride was the number 1 tight end. He was the guy you wanted, just an absolute machine. And he's pretty reasonably priced. I mean, $6K versus, we know the Rams historically, Joe, they have issues with tight ends. Like, I know their linebacking core is better this year, but again, I'll believe it when I see it. But the guy that I am just all in on, my boy Brock Bowers, 4,400. There's a couple of things. First of all, the Ravens, unlike the Chargers, are going to put that ass whooping on my poor Raiders. Like, it's not going to be like it was where the Chargers-Raiders game was close, right? Like, that game was close until late. This game will not be forcing more pass situations, right? We talked about McBride's target share. The second highest target rate among tight ends, Brock Bowers, 24%. And what was even more precise, he only had like a 77% offensive snap share. So not on the field as McBride, still heavily targeted, had 8 targets, 6 receptions, 48 yards. What I really like, again, that first read, 5 first read targets, only Trey McBride. Actually, McBride had 5 first read targets with Bowers. I'm sorry, it was Isaiah Likely, my other guy, who had 9 first read targets last week. So to me, it's either you spend up with McBride, you take Bowers, because I think the game script is going to be phenomenal for Bowers, or if Ferguson is out and you want to get cheap, I know technically it's a tough matchup. New Orleans is typically good, but I mean, Shoemaker being 2,900 with how much Dallas targets tight ends at home, I think that's a real value for cash. That's the kind of thing where you can get really flexible. Now, personally, I don't think I'm going to do it because I could play a Lazard at 3,300 who's only 400 more, and there's no concerns. I know he's going to get targeted. There's a good chance he has a decent game, and I'll just take McBride or Bowers there and fill out the rest of my lineup. But I did want to mention him. But honestly, those are the only 3. Even Likely, who is my guy. Like, my guy. I think that this is the Ravens game where they're up, and I would rather have Justice Hill. I'd rather have Derrick Henry. Like, I think they're going to get up and they're just going to pound the rock. And because of that, for me, it's really McBride, Bowers, or Shoemaker right now, and that's it. Where are you looking at the tight end?
I mean, I think you have to be going if you have the money. I'd love the McBride play. I mean, the Rams were not good against tight ends last year, which, this early in the season, you do want to pay a lot of attention to last year's stats. They were bottom 8 in overall on DK. They gave up 8 touchdowns. Only the Broncos gave up more touchdowns last season. 2 tight ends, nearly 1,000 yards. and 82 receptions, which was middle of the road, but giving up a lot of yardage, a lot of touchdowns to tight ends. Again, game we expect a lot of points. Guy who's averaging over 10 targets a game over his last 7 games. So, yeah, I think he's pretty clearly, for me, he's the top play. The other guys I'm kind of interested in, a lot of them are against defenses that were more successful against tight ends last year than they were week 1. So I have some questions. The Ravens were, unsurprisingly, considering how good that defense was last year, they were good against tight ends last year. But I'm with you. Bowers is obviously, outside of Devontae Adams, I'd say he's the most talented player in this Raiders offense.
He's a tight end, right? Like it was kind of what I was saying last week. He's basically a pass catcher that is going to up at tight end a good bit, but they ran a lot of 2 tight end, sets as well.
As they should.
Yep.
And yeah, loved what we saw target-wise week 1. As someone who ended up getting him in one of my season-long leagues because I got outbid for McBride, and maybe I'm better off without Kincaid, who we'll see. I guess it's still early. I was very excited with what we saw out of Brock Bowers because, cool. Going down the list, I do think I have some interest in Juwan Johnson. Again, Dallas, not good week 1 against tight ends. They were a good defense last year. Again, we're talking about the Cowboys, the Ravens last season. Those were 2 of the top. Those might have actually just been the 2 best defenses, give or take the Jets, in the NFL last year. But, they changed defensive schemes, so we'll see how that goes. Johnson, not a huge target share last week, 3 targets, but he did catch a touchdown. And, yeah, I think Dallas will have a lot more success than Carolina did, unsurprisingly, on offense. So that means a more pass-heavy script. And then if I'm going real cheap, Colby Parkinson, just stick with the Rams.
That's a great call. I actually should have. That's a great call with what's going on.
All the way down at 3,100. This is a guy who had 5 targets.
Yep. No,
4 receptions, over 40 yards.
And we know that the tight ends for the Rams, right? They're on the field all the freaking time, and they run routes on every freaking play.
And, again, Cardinals, not terrible against tight ends last year when you're looking at the overall stats, 13th.
But they were bad against everything else. You can't be dead last against everything.
But that's, again, they were 13th while facing the second fewest amount of pass plays last season. So it's even though they were 13th and you go, oh, that's all right. It's really they were low 20s or something because they were just trash against everyone. So, yeah. I don't think you can go. Obviously, there will be one guy at least in the Rams offense who doesn't have a big game. Of course, I'm saying that now, and I'm thinking about last week where Parkinson, among the 4 guys we've talked about, the pass catchers, he had the worst game, and he was a guy who cost, what did he cost last week? Same price, 3,100.
Yeah.
And he scored 8.7, and you're like, that's fine.
Yeah, fuck yeah. And cat.
So, yeah, I don't think you can really go wrong just guessing on any Ram. Obviously, we expect Cup guaranteed, barring, knock on wood, he doesn't get hurt.
Oh, Joe, don't you put that out there, you fucker.
But I would say of the 4 guys we named, it's guaranteed Cup plus someone else will have a good game. And I'm guessing it's at least 3 of the 4. And only one of those guys is expensive. So, yeah, light up the Rams. Again, Washington, Arizona, Carolina, Denver, those are the 4 defenses that were, according both to DVOA, which is going off of stats purely in the historical situations, and then PFF, who's going off watching all of the film, those are bottom 7 defenses according to both in week 1, and that's not a change from last year, so there's not really a reason to doubt those stats. So those are the ones early on. I'm targeting them, and I'm especially targeting them in games that could be shootouts, which is why the Cardinals are the ideal, because Denver's offense looked like a piece of crap, 3 yards per attempt with Bo Nix. It was atrocious. It was ugly. Hated it. Carolina somehow does not look better so far. I do think New Orleans is a solid defense.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so those offenses are not going to necessarily force you to pass. Whereas with Kyler Murray fully healthy, I think the Cardinals are going to be a good offense most of the season. That's the defense that I'm absolutely loving when I'm facing an opposing passing offense. So yeah, any of those 4 guys, put them in. Shit, if you wanted to just go all in on the Rams and say, I'm picking Stafford, I'm picking 3 of those guys, and then I'm going to go big somewhere else because 2 of those guys cost nothing, I like that. I'm in.
Man, I go ahead and Shoemaker, scratch them off the list because you're right. Parkinson for $200 more. If I'm going cheap, that is the better play, hands down. Real quickly, we'll do the defense, then we'll get out of here. Before that, though, maybe RIP to the Dolphins season. They're down 31-10, and Tua was knocked out of the game. So,
oh no,
not good news. I don't know what the report is, but God almighty. And again, if you don't know, we're recording this on Thursday night. I know this will not come out till tomorrow,
right?
but
Everyone should know now.
I'm sorry if you're, Dolphins fans.
Out with a concussion. Yeah.
Oh God, that's
the worst case scenario.
That's what I was worried about. Well, okay.
Yeah, that's terrible. I was about to say, like I was angry with myself when I left work late and didn't put a bet on the Bills before I left work. But not, I mean, what if the $10 I would have won obviously pales in comparison to honestly just being concerned about Tua Tagovailoa's health. That's a University of Arizona flashback to my college years. I was our quarterback, Tua Tagovailoa. But yeah, I mean, this is the nightmare scenario. Because honestly, I'd be considering retiring if I was him.
Yes, and I hope that he does because Muhammad Ali, like the list goes on and on. All right, let's not get too depressing before we get it.
Prayers up for him.
Absolutely. Defenses. You know the rule if you have listened to us before. Let's go garbage diving, okay? I'm going to – I think the play is the Saints at Dallas. I do. I think that Saints defense is legit. I don't believe necessarily that Dallas offense is as good as Cleveland because – if New Orleans can move the ball a little, I think that was the real issue with Cleveland's defense last week was Cleveland just could not move the ball, and their defense was on the field the entire game. Dallas really didn't do that much offensively. They just had the ball the entire time. But I will admit, I am very intrigued by the Cardinals 2,300. You think about it, the Rams are potentially missing 3 offensive linemen. They're missing Puka. You can do worse, and you normally don't even get a defense 2,300. A lot of weeks 2,400 is the cheapest. This week Carolina has earned it with their -1 points, and Arizona, they scored 9 points last week against Buffalo, right? So 2 sacks, the defensive touchdown, you never know. I think that I might consider that. Probably going to end up going with New Orleans because, again, I think that may be a really good defense. If you look at times, they were really good last year. The problem was I think the offense couldn't support them. I think this year the offense is at least going to be competent enough to give them a chance to cook where they're not exhausted the entire game. So, that's it. The only other one that if you want to convince me, Green Bay, it's put up or shut up at 2,600, right? They know they're going to have to carry that game. Indy's going to be on the road. But if we're staying, in those bottom, that would be, I think, the bottom 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 defenses. Normally I just say stay in the bottom 4. Those are the 3 I'm looking at. Who are you looking at?
If I happen to make a lineup and I have the money, because obviously, our strategy is always do everything else.
Yeah, dumpster diving. Yep.
Man, whoever you like, Patriots, Seahawks, you can talk me into either defense there. Because, again, Mike McDonald took over that Seahawks defense. They have some really good DBs.
Damn, I thought New England actually was 2,400. They're 28. I don't know why I wrote down.
If they were 2,400, they would be.
It would be last play, right? Because again, Seattle gave up all those pressures. I did not know that. I said that wrong.
So, 2 well-coached, pretty talented defenses. Seahawks offense did not look awesome. There were some flashes, but again, a Denver defense is quite bad. So I'm interested in both of them. I think slightly cheaper, the Titans. Again, like you said, Rodgers didn't look awesome. So, and
apparently guys in their late 30s, early 40s, Joe, coming off an Achilles. It's not so easy.
And then obviously, again, playing a rookie quarterback.
The G-Man!
All those caveats. But, yeah, like the Titans they didn't lose that game because of the defense. Like, they lost that game because Will Levis decided to throw left-handed to the
Well, and they gave up two. Was it a punt return? Was one of them two, or were they both defensive touchdowns? I can't remember.
It was a blocked punt.
Oh, that's right, blocked punt.
And so blocked punt and a pick six where the guy's throwing it left-handed when he gets sacked. So that's why they lost the game. So the Titans defense, who also, much like Seattle, getting Mike McDonald, Denard, is it Wilson? I'm blanking on his name. The defensive coordinator for the Titans this year was the DB's coach for Baltimore last year, which again was the best defense in football. So I think there's a reason to like that. If I'm trying to go super cheap, I think you're right. Again, I'm wary because, again, all those numbers I read about Dallas being better in their passing game against man defense than they were against zone.
Oh, that's a good point.
It scares me about New Orleans, but also the Cardinals D sucks. The Panthers D sucks. Vikings D does not suck, but they're playing San Francisco, so fuck no. So the Saints defense I do think is good, and I trust the San Francisco offense more than I trust Dallas. So if I had to go in that 2,500 and below, I think you're right. I would go with the Saints. But ideally, I want to try to get up in that Titans to Patriots Seahawks. That's where I'm hoping to have money. If it doesn't happen, I'll throw in the Saints. Plus, I'm always rooting against the Cowboys, so it feels at home.
So they have not played since 2021. I was looking up to see, well, have we had recent matchups? So it's been a minute, so there's not really much data there. We're going to get out of here because I know this will not surprise anybody that knows me and Joe. We've gone an hour and 16 minutes. Be sure to follow all the great work at Fantasy Six Pack. Be sure to sub to the Fantasy Six Pack YouTube channel. Follow them on social media accounts. I will have my DFS stacks and value plays article out tomorrow. Me and Joe will be joined by Kevin Tompkins on Fantasy and Frames tomorrow night to talk a little MME at 9 p.m. And then Sunday, me and Chris Robin, week 2 of us getting together for the final hour of the Sunday social show. I loved it. I don't know if you listened, Joe. Chris started our hour of being able to talk DFS fantasy football by ranting for 5 minutes about fuck the NFL for allowing their players to go to Brazil and play on that crap field. 100%. And he's like, how about y'all quit being greedy bastards and actually give a shit about your players? And I loved it. He was like, I'm sorry. I know I'm going on around. I was like, dude, you are 100% right. And this is why you're the man. Is you're right. Like it's outrageous.
It's unacceptable. I think it's cool that we're doing these games.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's not ideal travel wise, but week 1 is the easiest time to do it, honestly. And yeah, I think that's great. But I mean, first of all, it's even more atrocious that we sometimes have fields that are remotely close to that in normal NFL stadiums.
Hello, Meadowlands.
Which the crazy thing is that was actually improved turf that they put in last year, right before Aaron Rodgers got hurt. That was the new, better stuff than what they had before. So yeah, the field thing is insane. And of course, what's going to happen is they're going to make some guarantee about better fields, and then they're going to get an 18th game because that's what the owner's going to trade.
Yep.
And it'll be nice because I'll get to travel to more cities and see stuff. But again, we just had a $50 million quarterback get knocked out with his, I don't know what the number is of concussions now. There's no reason to add an 18th game. There's no reason these fields to be this way. I think it's great we have these caps now that are going to reduce concussions more. But we should be doing everything possible across the board for these players' health, both for their sake and for just pure greed, the product's sake.
Yeah.
So, yeah, 100% that deserved a 5-minute rant to start your guys' show. Do better, NFL owners. This is why anyone who's on the owner's side in any strike situation is
Right there, right, Joe? Give him a little Stone Cold
exactly.
Steve Austin.
And that's the funny thing too about looking back and watching like the movie The Replacements. You're like,
yes,
these guys are all scabs. Like, like it's fun in that movie, but in real life, it's like I wasn't born yet. But it's
screw
like,
you, Keanu Reeves.
Fuck the 80s when they actually had scab players, and I don't actually blame the scab players so much as
no, I know, yeah.
Right. Screw the owners always in every sport, but especially the NFL when there's any sort of lockout, because these guys are literally putting their lives on the line, or at least their long-term health. And yeah, take care of them. Come on. It's ridiculous.
Well, we hope we have another good week. 'Cause again, we had a great start. Me and Joe, I hope you guys enjoy the show. We put in a lot of time, effort, research. Our goal, and I say this, I should have said at the top, is we'll do the homework for you.
Right.
And we'll give you a lot of, options that we think there's a lot of, data science, whatever behind it that says these plays could go off. And then I know if people are listening to us talk for an hour and 20 minutes, they are into DFS, right?
For sure.
And so they know what they're talking about. We're just saving you time because I know life is busy and everything else. So we appreciate you guys. We'll be back soon. And seriously, we hope to it's not too bad because man, it scares me. Brain stuff's scary, people. So
who is the backup in?
It's Skylar Thompson.
Oh, that's right, because he did play that playoff game too.
And I'm pretty sure he threw a pick 6 like right after when he got in the game. So not a good start, but it is what it is. But Joe, I enjoyed it. We will see everybody soon. We'll be back next Friday. Take care, guys.